Hello and welcome to Tech Deals Game Performance Review Time, Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. We're playing Infinite Warfare today on 4 different graphics cards. A pair of AMD RX 460s, a 2GB and a 4GB card, as well as the GeForce GTX 1050 and 1050 Ti 4GB card. All 4 of these cards were installed in the same computer, an Acer Aspire pre-built desktop computer with Intel's Core i5 4400 4th generation quad-core processor, 4 true processing cores, 4 threads, 3.1 GHz turboing to 3.3. 8 GB of DDR3 1600 RAM is installed in this machine. We are playing today at 1080p Full HD resolution. On the pair of 2GB cards, we are running at low texture detail, and on the 4GB cards, we are running at high detail. Before each sequence, I have included the actual video settings so that you can see exactly what each card is running on if you wish to reproduce or compare these results to your own setup. Fraps was used for the minimum, maximum, and average game performance that you will see at the end of this video. Please note Fraps was not used to capture the video that you're watching, it was simply used to keep track of the frame rate. I used an external HD60 Pro hardware capture card installed in a separate computer to capture the video you're watching. The computer did not even know it was being filmed, so there is zero performance loss for the fact that you are able to watch the actual gameplay that was used to produce the numbers that you will see later in the video. The numbers in red at the top left corner of the screen are from MSI Afterburner. This provides us with information about what the computer and graphics card are doing in real time while we're playing. It helps you understand what is the limitation, what is the bottleneck, so to speak, that is holding back performance. In this case, if you look up there, you'll see the very first line, GPU. That's the actual graphics chip. Now, this first video is with the RX 460 2GB card. You'll see I've got a title card in the upper right-hand corner so you know which one you're watching. The limitation here is the graphics card. Even though it's a couple years old, the 4th generation i5 is not the performance limitation in this game. It is the graphics chip. Now, if you're on a budget, if you have a basic pre-built machine, the RX 460 and 1050 Ti are excellent cards to put into basic pre-builts because they do not require an external power connector, a PCI Express power connector. I covered this in the separate reviews of the cards. So we're using 100% of our GPU's compute power. Then you've got the temperature of the graphics chip itself, which is 63 degrees. That is well within reasonable limits. Then we have the fan speed on the card, about 800 RPM. That is pretty low, actually. This is a very silent card. And the clock speed of the card is just under 1200 MHz. Then we have the memory, the GDDR5 VRAM on the graphics chip itself. So the second line MEM is not the main system RAM, that is the graphics RAM. Remember to double the clock speed because it is in fact DDR or double data rate memory to get its effective speed. And we are using about 2 GB of it, which is all of the available VRAM. This is why we are running in low texture detail. You really cannot set it to high texture detail because it wants to use 4 GB, which you'll see in the next video clip, and it just doesn't run right. So with a 2 GB card, it does run fine, but you have to be in low detail. The third line is the actual CPU, the Intel i5 4440 CPU. The 22%, 25% means it's basically using 1 core. 50% would be 2 cores, 75% 3 cores, and 100% would be all 4 cores. This game does not require a quad-core CPU. In fact, it would run exactly the same, if not perhaps a little better, on an i3 because of a higher clock rate. It doesn't need more. Now, some games do, but this one doesn't. And the CPU is running at a very cool 40 degrees Celsius. Why? It's only using 1 or 2 of the cores, so it is not strained at all. The fourth line, RAM, that is the actual system RAM. I mentioned before there is 8 GB of RAM installed, so we're using 5.2 of it at least for allocated programs. Windows will use the rest for disk cache, for caching frequently used programs, so generally the Windows will have all of the memory used, but we're not suffering a performance limitation by not having more in. That being said, in 2016, I still recommend 16 GB of RAM because Windows runs a little smoother, it's a larger disk cache, some games do need more memory. And it's less than $40 these days. It's not very expensive to add 8 gigabytes of RAM. And then finally, the last line, we are running in DirectX 11, and you can see the real-time frame rate, which is pretty smooth at 60 frames per second. Short version, this plays fine. This is completely controllable. There are no issues whatsoever with playing Infinite Warfare on a basic entry-level card. This 2 gigabyte card here, which I have reviewed before, after mail-in rebate, can be had for under $90 these days. The fact that a 3-year-old pre-built desktop and a $90 graphics card can play the latest and greatest Call of Duty, well, that's pretty cool. Hardware has definitely come a long way since, well, even just a few years ago when you had to spend a lot of money to have a good gaming computer. You just don't anymore. They have gotten so much better. Graphics cards have come a long way over the past 20 years or so. At least 3D accelerated graphics cards are. For those of you who are new to the business and don't know, they have been around for about 20 years in terms of consumer flavor. Back in the 90s, you had the original 3DFX Voodoo. There were others, but really it was the 3DFX that brought it mainstream and certainly brought in game support. After that, AMD and NVIDIA both came out with their own cards. The first cards from each company were pretty weak in general, and it really wasn't until the Voodoo 3 that the 3DFX company got real competition. When the first Rivia TNT came out, and the first couple of decent AMD cards came out, they really got some competition. And of course, then the first GeForce card came out. I remember when the GeForce 256 came out, that thing was amazing. I also remember it was too expensive for me to own one at the time. I had a Rivia TNT2, and I remember seeing the reviews for the GeForce 256, and I really wanted to get one, but I had like no money at the time. And so it was not actually until the GeForce 2 came out that I managed to get one, although I couldn't afford the main one. I got I believe it was a GeForce 2 MX, the less expensive budget version. And I skipped the GeForce 3, and then I had a GeForce 4, but unfortunately at the time I didn't know the difference, and I got a GeForce 4 MX. And for those of you who don't know, the MX was really a rebadged GeForce 2 MX, whereas the GeForce 4s were actually new chips. Sneaky NVIDIA, shame on you for doing that. Although both companies have done that many times throughout the years. I've owned a number of AMD cards over the years as well. And I've waffled back and forth between AMD and NVIDIA, but today the performance that you get for under $100 is just incredible. Now, to be sure, the texture detail is set to low. No, all the details are not maxed. But hey, how does this look? This is awfully darn good. Does it look better with all the details cranked to the max? Sure, of course it does. However, an interesting thought is that this game on low detail actually looks better than Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare did on max detail, which granted was released a number of years ago, but it just goes to show that a few years ago games on max detail are starting to look worse than current games even on low detail. At the end of the day, a game is either fun or it isn't. Having high graphics detail is just eye candy. It's nice, and certainly it can add to the immersion and whatnot, but if you're on a budget, if you want to spend less than $100 on a graphics card, yes, an AMD RX 460 2GB graphics card will play this at about 60 frames a second at 1080p without any problem. That's pretty cool. These guys are about to get in trouble here, aren't they? They come right into the room while I'm standing on the side. Oh, watch out for those are kind of cool grenades. One of these days, they will probably invent such things. Of course, in the game, it's easy to have them only go after the bad guys. How do you have such things go after the good guys? I'm sure you could say, I know this is getting overthinking here, but you could say, well, the good guys will have radio frequency identification tags that will let you know that they are the good guys. But there'll always be an innocent civilian somewhere or somebody who doesn't have one. That's going to be interesting. That's pretty cool. I'll admit, the first time I played through this, I fired my regular assault rifle trying to figure out, how to kill this guy, and thankfully a message pops up that says, regular bullets don't harm this. Well, fair enough. Walking tanks probably don't get damaged by bullets, do they? I think it's funny that we have advanced super weapons. We're in space. There appears to be gravity. I guess we're not in space. We're on Europa or one of the Jupiter's moons, but We have these big robots, and yet we're still walking around ourselves. If these battle robots exist, how come we're not driving remote control robots instead of human bodies? I know, it's a game. What can I say? This guy is almost dead. And boom! Goodbye. Oh, wait, he's not dead. Man, that thing is tough to kill. There we go. Boom! And the 1 minute timer is running. You gotta love these pre-scripted sequences where, yeah, and he's completely dead. Run ahead. I think the original self-destruct timer was 10 minutes, and then it doesn't actually run the clock until you destroy the robot, because of course it might or might not take you more than 10 minutes. It's the first level, it's a training level. Cool atmosphere though, looks scary. I'm glad I'm not there. Quick, hit the button, hit the button, hit the button. And nothing could possibly go wrong here. This won't shoot them and go right through the, oh no. Hold on, hold on. This isn't good, and no! Smack. Well, that is the RX 460 2GB card. How about the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1050, also a 2GB card, play at basically the same details at low texture resolution? One thing you will notice if you look at the MSI afterburners in the upper left hand corner of the screen, you'll notice the fan RPM is 0. It was not 0 on the RX 460. No, this does not mean the fan's not turning. This is simply MSI afterburner not being able to detect the fan's output. This was filmed very soon after the 1050 came out. Infinite Warfare was a brand new game, and for whatever reason MSI is not detecting the fan speed. Perhaps it will in a future update, but I can assure you the fan on the graphics card is turning. It's silent. In fact, in order to check that it was turning, I stuck my head into the computer and I looked down and I squinted and I finally grabbed a flashlight and went, oh, yep, it's turning. It is, however, completely silent. Now, this particular GTX 1050 is the EVGA Superclock 1050, and the 1050 Ti is also the EVGA Superclock 1050. The RX 460 cards in this video are both the Gigabyte cards. I've previously done videos on both of those cards, but so those are both the dual fan Gigabyte cards, and these are the single fan GTX 1050 and 1050 Ti. If you look, you'll see our clock speed is much higher on the 1050 Ti. Not that the clock speed means anything, because of course they're completely different cards and different architectures. Our CPU usage is pretty low, our RAM usage is pretty reasonable, and our frame rate is basically 60 frames a second. Nothing to complain about. Now, if you're watching this video wondering, now wait a minute, if I can get 60 frames per second at full HD 1080p resolution on a $90 or $110 graphics card, what in the world does anybody buy $300, $400, $500 graphics cards? That's a great question. First of all, not all games play this well on these cards. I've tested several other games. I tested Tom Clancy's The Division. I tested Mirror's Edge Catalyst. I've run Grand Theft Auto 5 on them. Many games do run very well on these cards. Rise of the Tomb Raider does run reasonably well on these cards, but not at a smooth 60 frames a second. At least not at low to medium detail. On the 460 you do have to run it at lowest. It runs decently on the 1050 and 1050 Ti, but really a game like Rise of the Tomb Raider wants a GTX 1060 for overall better performance. So not all games run this well. We're also running in the single player mode rather than multiplayer. Multiplayer may well be different. Although if it's at all like Black Ops 3 was, multiplayer may actually run better than story mode. In my experience of testing Call of Duty Black Ops 3, I actually think that the multiplayer mode runs better than the story mode. Go figure, maybe it's more optimized, they've worked on it since release, they've come out with expansions, whereas the story mode as well, you're just playing against the computer, it doesn't matter as much. Now we'll kill these Muppets here. One of the characters, I can't remember which, in one of the Modern Warfare games, I think it might have been Modern Warfare 2, but I don't remember, called the enemies Muppets, which I've adopted ever since then, because they kind of are, really. They follow pre-programmed paths, kind of like they're on strings or poles, just like Muppets, and they go down just as fast. This looks awfully familiar. I think we did this already. We might have done this on the previous videos, what can I say? Now, if you're sitting here watching this going, why include so much video? Well, herein lies the challenge. When doing these types of videos, I could, of course, just include 60 seconds of gameplay and not include the whole first battle. If I do that, somebody may say, well, you're not showing enough, or I wanted to see more, or I wanted to see how the big battle with the robot would be. In which case, of course, I could just cut out this first part here and put the big battle with the robot. But this gives you a chance to really watch the game and see the detail. If you're actually watching this middle section of the video, assuming you haven't slid the slider forward on YouTube all the way to the end, leave me a note in the comment section below. Do you like the length of this video? Is it too long? Do you just want a minute or two of gameplay on each graphics card and just call it a day at 10 minutes? Or do you want a really long video like this? You gotta tell me what you want, because at the end of the day, it doesn't make any difference to me. I'll make them 10 minutes if you want them 10 minutes. I'll make them an hour if you want them an hour. The whole point of these videos is to be helpful to you. That's the idea. You got to tell me what you want. When I posted my original video reviews of the 1050 and the RX 460, one of the questions I did ask was, do you want individual reviews of the 2GB and 4GB cards, or would you rather I put all 4 cards into one video? Overwhelmingly, you all asked for 4 cards in one video. Having said that, I might trim the next 2 sections of this video just a bit, because we are halfway through the second gameplay video at the moment. And while I can certainly find things to talk about for half an hour, the question is, do any of you want to listen to it? I'm sure I could talk about all sorts of technology and video card history and other things, but I don't know that a gameplay video is really the place to do it. But that's okay. The whole idea is to be helpful and provide you with videos that show you what you'll really get for the money when playing on these type of cards. Interestingly enough, if you watched my individual unboxings and reviews of the 1050, 1050 Ti, and RX 460 cards, one of the things I talked about was the value of these cards was the fact that they do not require a 6-pin PCI Express power connector. That's really the claim to fame to these. These cards are installed, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, in an Acer Aspire basic pre-built computer. This machine comes with about a 200-ish watt power supply. I think it's a 250 or 260 watt. It's not a 300, and it certainly doesn't have a 6-pin PCI Express power connector, nor does it have a lot of room or cooling in the case. However, having run it all day for 2 days, recording benchmarks on 4 different cards in 9 different games, it never had any issues, it was never loud, it never got hot, it simply never had a problem with it. And that's exactly what these cards are for, is for installing in a basic machine. At the moment, now the machine that I have is not for sale anymore, it's 3 years old, but Acer does have an updated model that I do need to get reviewed. It has got the 6th generation chip, the i5-6400 in it, and that machine is currently for sale on Amazon for about $400 or so. 8 gigs of RAM, and it comes with a 2TB hard drive. The only thing it really needs is a solid state drive added to it, and when I do a review of that machine, I will certainly show the installation of both a solid state drive as well as how to add another 8 gigabytes of RAM if you'd like, and maybe even put a video card in and see how that goes. But if you're looking for a basic machine for about $500 that can play games, buy that machine for $400, add either the RX 460 or the GTX 1050 or 1050 Ti, although the 1050 Ti would make it a 550 machine, and you've got a pretty good gaming rig. Now somebody is bound to say, why don't I just buy a pre-built like that for $400 and put a GTX 1060 or an AMD RX 470 or 480 in it? You can, except there's a perfectly good machine you can buy that has already had that done to it, and that is the $700 CyberPower pre-built machine that I have reviewed extensively on my channel. Now that machine's $700 to be sure. However, that comes with an AMD RX 480, which is double the performance of what you're seeing here. It's double the performance of the RX 460 and nearly double the performance of the GTX 1050 and 1050 Ti. It comes in a larger Cooler Master case, it comes with a better motherboard, it's more expandable, it comes with a slightly faster processor. If you want to buy a pre-built gaming machine, don't buy a $400 machine and add a $200 graphics card to it. Yes, that's $600, but for $100 more, you get a better case, a better motherboard, a better power supply. That machine comes with a 600 watt power supply that would drive a GTX 1080 without a problem. That's what you should buy if you're looking to buy a pre-built gaming machine at that $600 to $700 price point. But for $500, buy the $400 machine, buy one of these cards, and you're off to the races. In fact, to play this game, you don't technically even have to buy the $400 machine. Lenovo has a machine, I believe it's a Lenovo H50. It's about $350, and it's got an Intel i3 6100 chip. Now that's a 2-core instead of 4-core, but it's hyper-threaded. So it has 2 cores with 4 threads at 3.7 gigahertz. It saves you $50 over the cost of the 4-core machine, and if you're on a very tight budget, fair enough. If you were to take that $350 machine and install the RX 460 2GB card, which is $90 or less, especially after some mail-in rebates, for a very reasonable price, less than $450, you've got a computer that will play Call of Duty Infinite Warfare at 1080p, granted at low detail, but it will. Or you could spend $10 or $15 more and get the 4GB version of the RX 460 and play at high detail, and it certainly does that just fine. It won't play all games at high, but it plays this one, and it certainly is an option if you're looking for a value. Now, one of the questions that is bound to be asked in the comments below, and of course I do encourage comments and feedback. I read them. I can't reply to everyone. I'm now getting too many comments to reply to every single comment, but I do read them. Is why did I install this card into a 2-year-old computer, actually almost 3-year-old computer, since this is the original Haswell and not the Haswell refresh? Simple answer: to show that you don't have to buy the latest and greatest machine to get great performance. This game is not going to play any better on a 6th generation chip over a 4th generation chip. Now, the next question is, well then why didn't I install it into the 2nd generation that I have reviewed on my channel multiple times and I've done game performance videos on, the i5 2400? Well, the simple answer to that is this is kind of a bridge machine. This is showing the difference, splitting the difference between 2nd gen and 6th gen. Now, I certainly could test this game on both the 6th and the 2nd gen and do a comparison on what 5 years worth of processor performance improvements gives you, but here's something worth considering. Our graphics card is the limitation. Look at that, we're at 99, well, not even 99% at the moment. The CPU is not completely busy. We are not CPU limited playing this game. We're graphics card limited. Now, if you get a more powerful graphics card, if you buy a GTX 1060 or 1070 or an AMD RX 480, that equation starts to change. You can get higher frame rates, run at higher resolution. If you want to play at higher than 1080p resolution, if you want to get yourself a faster graphics card and play at 1440p, for example, yes, I would upgrade a 2nd or 3rd generation machine. I don't know that I would bother upgrading a 4th generation. The 4th generation is still really, really good. I don't know that I would bother replacing this machine if this is what you wanted to use. Anything up to about an RX 480 or a GTX 1060 would be fine in this level machine. I would not put a 1070 in this. A 1070 would be out of place in a 3-year-old i5 non-overclocked machine. In fact, a 1070 is worth more than the entire computer I installed this into. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But for anything less than that, certainly for a card like this, it makes a great value and a great machine. Now we're moving on to the 4GB cards. This section here, you can see the title card at the top, but you can also see, I'm going to come down to the texture detail here in a second, you'll be able to see texture. There we go. High texture resolution. How does this look? Now I'm going to trim this video shorter. In the process of recording this voiceover, one of the things I realized was this video was simply becoming way too long. Nobody wants to watch this for an hour. So I'm going to trim out the first section of the next 2 runs on the 4GB cards to just the battle with the robot. And here we are with the battle with the robot. I skipped that part. Perhaps I should have done it on the whole thing, but since I've already recorded those voiceovers, I'll leave it as it is. This will still make the video pretty long. Again, leave your comments and suggestions in the comment section below. Do you think I should just have a minute or 2 on each one and make these really, really short? How much of these are you actually watching? We are at about the 24-minute mark as I record this voiceover, so How many people are watching the 24-minute mark? That's the question that YouTube does not answer. I really wished YouTube would provide a histogram that would let me know what parts of videos are being watched. And if they do provide it, and I have not found it after 6 months of using YouTube, then please, by all means, let me know it exists. I have looked, and all YouTube tells me is the average watch time per video. But they don't tell me which part of videos people are watching. Are they watching the first minute and fast forwarding to the end? Are you watching the first 5 minutes and quitting? What's actually getting watched? Of course, by saying this at the 25-minute and 23-second mark, the only people who will hear this and give me a comment below are those who actually watched all the way through this video. If you have, thank you, I appreciate it. Now we're in the battle with the robot at high detail. Do you notice a difference? Speaking of noticing the difference, somebody is bound to say, how come I don't do a split screen with the left-hand side of the screen, for example, the 2 gig version, and the right-hand side, the 4 gig version? You know, I thought about that, and that's much easier to do. I've done it on a couple of videos. I did it on the Grand Theft Auto 5 video comparing different cards and different CPUs with the built-in Grand Theft Auto 5 benchmark. It's easier to do when you are using a built-in benchmark because it's on rails and the screen doesn't change. If I put the 2 gig and 4 gig version side by side, it would be a completely different battle. They would be in different sections. It would be very disoriented because it'd almost be like playing same screen multiplayer on a console. There's no way to fight this battle and have it be the same each time. I mean, sure, I could split it, but then it's a bit awkward. The length isn't the same. I could trim it out and just show a minute or two. I've also stopped using most of the built-in benchmarks. I've still got a few recorded to post, but in my experience so far in playing around with them, I'm not happy with them. They don't necessarily reflect the real-world performance that you'll get. Having used the built-in benchmark in Rise of the Tomb Raider, and then having played the game, and then using the built-in benchmark to Grand Theft Auto 5, and then having played the game, there's too many situations where the benchmark does not, in my opinion, reflect the real performance of the game. It does, to some extent, most of the time, sometimes kinda, until it doesn't. The other big thing missing from a built-in benchmark is it doesn't give you any indication of how smooth and responsive the game is. Is there any input lag? When you press the keys, is there any delay to moving your character? Back in the summer of 2016, I did a game performance video of Fallout 4 on a Pentium G4400 custom build machine, a $350 gaming machine. Very simple machine I put together. It was the first build I did on my channel. And that is just a 2-core, 2-thread chip. No hyper-threading like the i3s. The frame rate was great. I mean, it was in the 50s. A lot of the time it was between 50 to 60 frames a second. And yet I gave that 2 thumbs down, not recommended, not playable. And a number of people said in the comment section below that game, what in the world? Not playable? You're getting 55 frames a second. What are you expecting? 200? To which my response is no. It's not the frame rate. It's the playability. How controllable is the game? If you watch that video, I would press keys, and then the character would move half a second later. I would try to fire the gun, and the gun would fire half a second later. There was between a quarter to a half a second of lag between trying to make my character move. I'd press the space bar and the jump would be a quarter second later. It was very laggy and unresponsive. Same game, same graphics card, on an i3, totally playable and responsive. The limitation was the 2-core Pentium chip, not the graphics card. So, that's an example of a situation that you will only uncover it by actually playing the game. Just running a built-in benchmark will not show that to you. Here we are at the GTX 1050 Ti 4GB card. Right there, you can see high texture resolution. This runs really, really nicely. Now, all of these games average about the same frame rate, but the minimum is where the difference is, and this 1050 Ti is really nice. The 1050 Ti is different than the RX 460 in the sense that the pair of RX 460 cards, the 2 and 4GB RX 460 cards, are basically the same chip, the same amount of processing resources, the same compute power. The only real difference between the two cards is how much VRAM, video RAM, are on the cards. If you don't need the extra texture resolution, then just get the 2 gig card, it's fine. With the 1050 and 1050 Ti, they are not the same card. The 1050 has 17% fewer compute resources, actual execution units, on the card than the 1050 Ti does, so it's slower. Now, it's not 17% slower in the real world because everything has not been cut down. Yes, it does have half the VRAM, but it's worth noting the video RAM on the 1050 is the same speed as on the 1050 Ti. Also, you have similar numbers of render output processors. Some of the units, texture units and such, are changed, but some aren't. So the whole chip isn't cut down, just part of it, the actual compute units. On average, in my experience, it's about 10% slower than the 1050 Ti. Now, if you need more VRAM, take a look at the numbers on the top of the screen. We are using 3.6 gigabytes of VRAM. Now, of course, the 1050 Ti, all 1050 Ti's have 4 gigs of VRAM. The 1050 has 2. If you tried playing this game at high detail, high texture detail on a 2 gig card, this would be a slideshow. Performance would be cut in half or more. It will run, but what happens is the extra texture detail has to be dropped into main system RAM, and main system RAM is much, much slower than the video RAM. One interesting thing worth noting is the amount of main system RAM being used. If you watch throughout this video, you will note that it is not consistent between runs. Same computer, same installation of Windows. These were all filmed on the same day. They all had the same programs running on the machine. None of them had anything running in the background. The only things running were, of course, Steam, because Steam has to be open to run the game. MSI Afterburner's running. Fraps is recording the frame rate. The actual game footage, of course, is being recorded on an external capture card. And nothing else was loaded. I didn't have OneDrive loaded. I didn't have any other programs running on the task tray. There's nothing running in the background. No web browsers are open. So take a look at the VRAM use here. We are at 6.7 gigabytes. If you go back to the 1050, in this particular section of the game, it's below 6. In fact, it's over 1 gigabyte less main system RAM being used. Is that because of the higher texture detail? Is that because there's something different about running at high texture quality rather than low texture quality? Perhaps. The game, in fact, may be keeping all the information in VRAM also in your main system RAM. As you buy more powerful graphics cards, as you use higher resolutions and higher details, you need more system RAM. So on a low-end graphics card playing games at low quality detail, you can get away with less VRAM. Look at that, we're inching up on 7 gigabytes. I suspect in more detailed sections of this game, you would get close to 8. Maybe not, I haven't played through the whole thing yet. This is why I think it's worth upgrading to 16 gigabytes of RAM. There's nothing left for Windows to use for a RAM cache or a swap file. Windows will use that extra RAM even if programs aren't trying to use it. It is less than $40 to upgrade your RAM from 8 to 16, and it will let everything load into RAM. It will give you a nice big RAM cache. It lets the programs expand to however much RAM they want. It prevents Windows from having to use memory compression. There's a technology Microsoft hasn't talked very vocally about, but it does use. As your system RAM starts to get full, Windows will start to compress it. But this uses CPU power, and this increases overall, latency as it has to compress and decompress RAM depending on what's being loaded. It slows your machine down. So adding more RAM, if your RAM is fully utilized, actually can provide a small performance boost. Not a big one, a couple of percent. It might take the stutters out more than anything else if you start to get stuttering as your RAM fills up and your computer starts going to swap file. Even if you have a solid-state drive, swap files are still much, much slower than... Oh, that's going to explode. That's going to hurt. Swapping to an SSD is still much slower than main system RAM. 47 seconds to go. Here comes the big, huge gun that's going to cause us all kinds of grief when we shoot the 3 robots. And... of course, I try to shoot them here, and this doesn't going to turn out well. Why did I die? This is actually the first one I recorded. I started with the 1050 Ti and worked my way backwards. There, we're back to 45 seconds. I worked my way backwards. This is the very, very first time I had played this game. So I didn't know what those robots were, and it takes me a second to find the button to press. So yes, I've played every Call of Duty since the very first one, and of course here I am thinking that this is going to do something, and it doesn't. And so I'm trying to figure out, and oh, and there's a little indicator, and press the button, and there we go. What can I say? I, of course, could trim that out and, you know, hey, yeah, I knew what I was doing, but hey, sometimes it's fun to see when mistakes get made, and so I left that in there. And I certainly didn't know what to expect at this point. And here we are at the results. Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, 1080p low texture detail on the pair of 2GB cards. Average of 59 frames per second on both, minimum of 39 frames per second on both, max of 62 on both. Yes, Fraps actually recorded those numbers exactly as they are on both cards. It made absolutely no difference. Yes, I realize that we're frame rate limited to 60 frames per second. However, the minimum indicates that basically there was only 1 or 2 spots where the frame rate dropped down. Otherwise, those were very, very smooth. Completely playable, no issue whatsoever. Either card is just fine. How about the 4GB cards with high texture detail? At high texture detail on the 4GB cards, they both still average about 60 frames per second, but there's a difference with the minimum. The GTX 1050 Ti is in fact faster than the 460, noticeably so. The minimum was 50 versus a minimum of 39. When I looked at the actual chart, the frame rate over time chart, that corroborated it. The 1050 Ti was smoother. Having said that, you'll have to decide, is it worth spending the extra money to raise the minimum frame rate by 11 frames per second over the price of the RX 460. Prices change, so I don't want to get into prices in this video, but in the video description below will be links to Amazon and Newegg for both cards, both the 2 and 4GB versions of both cards. Compare the price. If there's only $10 or $20 difference, get the 1050 Ti. On the other hand, if there's a $40 price difference between the 460 and the 1050, well, then you'll have to decide, do you want to spend that money to raise the minimum frame rate, even though the average isn't that different? So was this video helpful to you? Give it a like. Was it not? You know what to do. Remember to subscribe to my channel with the big, huge red button right below. Leave your questions and comments in the comment section below. And as always, use the links in my video description to Amazon, Newegg, eBay, Kingwin, and G2A for buying your games. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much, and I will see you in the next video.